Friends, Romans, Pandormen, and or women, lend me your ears. No, seriously, I need like 4 human ears in the next 2 hours, or this guy named Grulio is gonna break my wheels. I come bearing the most grievous of news. The first soldier down. We've lost one of our own. Michael John Mamarill was a fan of Borderlands, and though any words of mine will seem paltry to that of family or friends, I, Claptrap Pete Claptrappington, am humbled and honored to join in the celebration of a life that ended far too soon. The problem with reality is terrible things can happen to good people, and the most we can do is stand by our friends and hope they get better. Sometimes they don't.
This voice message was left in the game to commemorate Michael J. Mamarill. A fan of the original Borderlands, he was unfortunately diagnosed with a terminal illness at the age of 22. After he had passed away, Carlo, a close friend of his, sent an email to Gearbox Software to ask if they could do an eulogy from his favorite character in the game, Claptrap P. Claptrappington. And this was that. In fact, they went even further and added him as an interactive character in the game, and even had an achievement for finding him. Death is really strange. It's inescapable, indiscriminate, and most of all, inevitable. But without death, life would have no meaning. How could something that brings loss, grief, and sadness be the very thing that gives us the will to live? I don't have an answer for that, but I do know that death comes for us all, whether slowly and expectedly, or suddenly and without warning. When this happens, we grieve. We all cope in different ways. Some of us pray, some of us dance, and some of us cry. But some create. For centuries, we've honored death with monuments, statues, and rituals. But in the late 20th century, a new space for mourning emerged: the digital world. For a long time, video games were seen as an escape, a way to step outside the limits of real life and live through worlds that would otherwise be impossible. But with enough time within these worlds, communities started to form and relationships started to develop. While video games were a way to escape, it eventually became something that you could be good at, something you can be interested in. Each game became its own world with its own people, with its own cultures, ideals, and attributes. Each world began to have its own meaning. But once a place becomes meaningful enough for people to live part of their lives there, grief eventually follows. There are countless stories of someone playing with their friend late at night, saying goodbyes and not realizing that it's the last time they'll ever talk to each other. But when this happened, people started doing what they always do: create. But instead of creating in the real world, they created contextually within these worlds to not only respect and honor them, but the medium that they developed their friendship through. And just as there are many ways to commemorate passing in the real world, there are just as many diverse ways to commemorate passing in the digital world. The purpose of a funeral is to care for the body in a way that honors the individual, whether that's through burial, cremation, mummification, or even other ways. But with a funeral, you're working with a physical body, and while you can take a lot of things into the digital world, the one thing you can't take is your physical form. So, what happens when there's no body to gather around? That's where memorials come in. Symbols, structures, or even events created in the honor of the individual, even if the individual's physical form isn't present. Memorials have been created for centuries in cases where people's bodies were never recovered, such as in times of war. But in digital spaces, it became a way for players to grieve. Here, memorials evolved not as replacements for funerals, but as an additional way to grieve, one that reflects the world where the individual's friends and families found meaning together. On Reddit, user QuesterRS says, I remember attending a funeral for a highly respected and prominent community member on the Dutch Men2 servers a long time ago. Everyone stood in a circle around the town square and was silent for a good couple of minutes. There were a lot of players there, and even though I did not personally know the guy, the sheer respect and scale of this moment was quite impactful. Sometimes, digital spaces actually do become replacements for funerals in situations where you can't visit them. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, many family members and friends couldn't have a proper funeral for their loved ones or visit graves because of the quarantine. But people still found a way to grieve by making their own private memorials inside, for example, Animal Crossing. Twitter user EmmyFaze, who lost her grandmother at the beginning of April 2020 and was unable to attend her funeral, crafted a beautiful seaside memorial where they can visit and honor their grandmother. She and my grandpa loved going to the beach. I feel so upset not being able to say goodbye, but now I can remember her more every day. But not every memorial is quiet, private, or personal. Sometimes the death of one player becomes a tragedy across an entire online world. Just before the 2012 Benghazi attack, Sean Smith, a Foreign Service Information Management officer at the US consulate in Libya, sent a chilling message to the leader of his online gaming guild. Assuming we don't die tonight, we saw one of our police that guard the compound taking pictures. Within hours, Smith was killed alongside 3 other American personnel. But that's only part of the story. For most people reading the news, Sean Smith was an American diplomat killed in Benghazi. But inside EVE Online, thousands of players knew Sean as Vilerat, the longtime chief diplomat of Goonswarm, one of the game's most powerful player alliances. What made his death so powerful inside the EVE Online community was not only who he was in real life, but who he had been inside the game. I'm not sure if this is how I'm supposed to react to my friend being killed by a mob in post-revolutionary Libya, but it's pretty awful. And Sean was a great guy, and he was a goddamn master at this game we all play. And even though a lot of people may not realize how significant an influence he had, if you play this stupid game, you may not realize it, but you play in a galaxy created in large part by Vilerat's talent as a diplomat. This was said by Goonswarm director Alex Gianturco. After his death, players mourned him across forums and inside EVE Online itself, with tributes, renamed stations, and community memorials. This was not just players reacting to a headline. They were grieving someone real who had helped shape the world that they shared. Sean Smith's story shows how a player can leave behind more than a name or even memories. He left behind an entire history inside this massive digital world. So for many players, mourning him was not just about losing one person. It was about mourning a legacy that had already been part of the world that they shared. Sometimes, memorials are created not just inside a game, but into the very essence of a game itself. Rather than create inside of a game itself can be developed to honor a life. That Dragon Cancer is an excellent example of this. That Dragon Cancer was a game developed by Ryan and Amy Green alongside a small team under the name Numinous Games. It was developed from the experiences of the couple after their third child, Joel Green, was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer at 12 months of age. By November 2010, the doctors had given Joel months to live. But despite this, he continued to live for 4 years beyond his initial diagnosis. The game was an autobiography of that period of time, showing the different experiences and difficult choices the couple had to make. The art style is subdued, not realistic in the traditional sense, but still impactful. For example, one design decision that they made was leaving the faces featureless. This helped the player engage with the characters by imagining themselves in their place. The game went through significant challenges, but in the end, it gave the impact it was trying to give. It honored Joel's memory and it helped other people sit with losses that look similar to their own. But grief in games is not always this open. Sometimes a game does not tell you right away what was lost. It makes you walk around the damage first. You see the guilt, the silence, the avoidance, and only later do you understand where it all came from. This is where Omori comes in. This game specifically looks at grief, guilt, and repression in a very complex but still personal way. The grief here is attributed to a specific situation, but the way it is expressed feels almost broad enough for anyone with the regret to recognize. It is an amazing game that shows how grief can be expressed in all sorts of ways, and it doesn't need to be dark or depressing in the traditional sense, but can be hidden under a guise of comfort and color. Omori shows most of his story through its gameplay, as it is inspired by traditional Japanese role-playing games. The game is essentially split into two halves: the imaginary world of Headspace, the real world, which is set in Faraway Town, and occasional encounters with spaces such as the white space and black space. In the beginning of the game, Omori wakes up in white space, a barren void where he has lived in as long as he can remember. In white space, he enters a door which opens to the vibrant world of Headspace, where he meets Aubrey, Kel, Hiro, Basil, and Omori's older sister, Mari. As the game progresses, it is revealed that Mari had committed suicide in the real world 4 years ago, which led to the friend group breaking apart. Sunny, who is Omori's real-world counterpart, became a shut-in because of this. But eventually in his dreams, Sunny finally confronts the truth behind Mari's death, that he did it himself. Sunny, during an argument, accidentally pushed his sister down a staircase, killing her, and Basil arrived right at that moment, witnessing the incident. Devastated over Mari's death and in denial that Sunny was the one who killed her, he helped frame her death as a suicide by hanging her corpse, with this incident being the catalyst for the rest of the game. Some pretty heavy stuff. This game handles grief in a very interesting way, as it frames grief as something that is central to the main character's personality. Grief oftentimes is something that happens to us due to external circumstances, something caused by forces other than ourselves, usually forces we have no control over. It is something to get over, and a lot of the time there are people who are grieving with you, alongside you, who can help you move on. But this game flips that and makes the driving factor of grief internal, literally having the cause of death be the main character. And while the situation is not entirely relatable in every aspect, it can still be very personal to people who experience specific forms of grief. For example, in the aftermath of a death, many times people feel as if they could have done something for that person, that they could have helped them feel better before their passing. I could have spent more time with them. I wish I showed them how much I care about them. Oh, how I wish I could have told them how much I love them. But I think this game targets a much more specific type of grief that people have when they feel as if they are responsible for the source of the grief. Self-blame. If I could have done this, they wouldn't be dead by now. I wish I talked them out of this. I wish I didn't drink that night, so I could have helped him. I wish I had helped them. I wish I had known. It's all my fault. It talks about the grief that not only makes you miss someone, but makes you hate yourself for still being here while they aren't. Grief doesn't always look like crying in a room full of people. Sometimes it looks like building an entire world in your head just to escape the reality of your situation. Now, all of the tributes so far have been grand and ginormous. Entire memorials, events, or even a game made for coping and helping people deal with grief. But the most common form of tributes aren't grand spectacles, but they're hidden whispers, small gestures and details hidden away in games. For example, in Doom Eternal, at the Doomslayer's home base, there's a bookshelf filled with books and comics. If you look closely, you can find a book that is named How to Comb Your Mustache by Clifton M. Fishbach. This is an Easter egg commemorating Mark Edward Fishbach, otherwise known as Markiplier. Clifton was Markiplier's father, who had sadly passed away in 2008.
One of these books has an Easter egg. There. How to Comb Your Mustache, Clifton M. Fishbach. That's my dad's name. And my dad had a killer mustache. Here's a picture of my dad with a mustache. They put this in because I said to them how important this game was to me. This was one of the original games that I ever played, and it always has a special place in my heart. And so they said they were going to do something special, and now it's going to be in the game forever. And it's the biggest book here, too.
For most people, it's just a name on a book, sitting quietly on a shelf. But for the person it was meant for, and for the people who understand the reference, it means something more. And in a way, that might be the most common kind of memorials in games. Not the huge public events, and not the massive monuments, but small details left behind by developers, friends, or communities saying, this person was here, they were alive, and they mattered. So far, we have talked about memorialization and how people can do it in digital spaces to honor their friends and family. But we do have to ask an uncomfortable question. Did the person consent to being memorialized in this type of world? Because once a real person is placed inside of a game, regardless of intent, they are part of an experience. They are no longer just being remembered by friends and family. They are part of a monetary product built to entertain. A product that can be streamed, clipped, marketed, sold, and revisited by millions of people. Should an individual be memorialized in such an environment? And even if the intent is right, like we said before, how can we make sure that the individual is honored properly and not being used as emotional branding? The topic of consent is very important in these situations as corporations become more and more involved in our lives and our digital footprints become more and more vast. Who is responsible for these memorials when they are made? And who is accountable for when these memorials get disturbed, embellished, or even desecrated? And this is not just hypothetical. In 2006, World of Warcraft players held an in-game funeral for a player named Faijin at Frostfire Hot Springs in Winterspring. Mourners lined up to pay their respects, but because this was still inside a game, and because it happened to happen on a PvP server, another group of players raided the funeral and killed the mourners. The incident became infamous because it showed how quickly something like a funeral can be disrupted when grief exists inside a playable world. In the real world, these questions are easier to answer. Graveyards and memorials have caretakers, gates, security cameras, and systems built around protecting them. But in the digital world, especially in a world where people can find creative ways to disrespect and desecrate each other every day, where a patch can alter a memorial, a server shutdown can erase it, and a company decision can decide whether it survives at all. That question becomes much more harder to answer. Grief is a difficult thing to explain. It's heartbreaking, but at the same time, it's what we live for. Every relationship inadvertently ends in grief, but in my opinion, I don't think that's a bad thing. Grief to me is just a reminder of how we yearn to love forever. It's what these memorials, graves, and reminders are all about. Death has and will continue to take our friends, family, and loved ones. But what it won't take is our memories of them and our gestures of love, not just to them, but to one another.
Carlo, everyone at Gearbox was deeply touched by your request to have our silly little robot join you in eulogizing your friend Michael. It means more to us than you'll ever know. And thanks to both of you for allowing us to become even a small part of what was clearly a very special friendship. Our deepest condolences for your loss. Tonight, we raise our glasses to the memory of Michael John Mamaril. Though he may be gone, he will live on forever in the